Fate Stay Night was one of the first anime I watched, and newer shows such as Fate Zero helped to cement my love for the genre and the Fate universe. At this point with so many different shows and spin-offs, it can be very intimidating for anyone wanting to get into this show. Today I'm going to go through all the anime, giving you a summary without spoiling anything, and talk a little bit about the origin of the show. The order I present them in will be, for the most part, with a few exceptions, the order I watch them in, and the order I recommend you watch them in if you plan on watching everything. However, if you want to watch a particular show, I'll give you my recommendations on the background information you should have watched, which actually isn't too much. Fate Stay Night was released in 2006. You might be curious about Fate Stay Night, Unlimited Blade Works, and Heaven's Feel, but we'll get to those in a minute here. Fate Stay Night was a graphics novel released for Windows in 2004. I haven't tried, but chances are you can still download it and play it if you so wish. To the best of my understanding, the game has 3 different endings, depending on who you choose as your girl. In this version, the character Shiro ends up with Saber. Well, since Fate likes to call people by their summoned class, this will get really confusing, so let's call her King Arthur. Some people don't like this one, saying it's a little simplistic, bland, and follows a lot of older tropes, like Shiro falling unconscious all the time. He gets nearly fatally wounded a lot, which doesn't kill him because of spoilers. When he's talking about it, he says people should die when they are fatally wounded, and so we get the iconic, people die when they are killed. Anyways, the series does a good job of introducing the rules of a Grail War, and overall isn't a bad version of the Fuyuki Grail War. Not my favorite, but not terrible. Following Fate Stay Night, I would recommend watching Fate Zero, since this follows the release schedule and you'll get some of Fate Zero's references to Fate Stay Night towards the end of the series. That being said, I don't think you need to have watched any of the Fate Stay Night versions to fully understand and appreciate Fate Zero, so you can start here if you'd really like. Alternatively, you can go on to watch Fate Stay Night, Heaven's Feel, or Unlimited Blade Works next, which I'll push down the line just a little bit longer. Fate Zero, in my opinion, is much better than the original Fate Stay Night, and does a great job of fleshing out its characters' motives, flaws, and ideals. The graphics, visual style, and animation are also a huge step up. Fate Zero is a prequel to all the Fate Stay Night routes, but kind of assumes the Unlimited Blade Works route to the graphic novel, but watching any of them should give you a good idea of what's going on. If I had to pick a favorite show from the Fate universe, it would have to be a tie between this one and Unlimited Blade Works, simply because Ren, best girl, and the detail put into each character's motives are awesome. It's less a battle of who has the bigger laser, and more about philosophies and tactical strategies. The first hour of the series is literally people just talking about their motives and explaining the Grail War to new viewers. Some of the servants even gathered to have a philosophical debate rather than fighting at one point in the show, and it's one of my favorite episodes of my favorite show. I recommend following up Fate Zero with Unlimited Blade Works. Again, Unlimited Blade Works does a great job of introducing new viewers to the concepts of a Grail War. With the 3 Stay Night routes, this is the route that focuses on Rin Tosaka and reveals the most about Shiro Emiya. The visuals are on par, if not slightly better than that of Fate Zero, giving it the nickname of Fate Stay Night Unlimited Budget. This is, like I said earlier, probably one of my favorite shows of the universe, and recommend anyone to watch it whether you are familiar with Fate or not. Shiro still gets beaten up like in the original anime, however not quite as much. If I recall, all the Fate shows have a good amount of blood, however, this one was towards the top. Just be aware if you're sensitive to blood. Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel is the only series that is kind of part of, in my opinion, the core of Fate. They recommend having watched at least 1 or 2 other routes. That is, I recommend watching the 2006 Fate Stay Night or Unlimited Blade Works before watching Heaven's Feel. I'm only going to talk about the first 2 of 3 movies since the third comes out March of 2020, a couple of months after making this video. The Heaven's Feel route, from my understanding, focuses on Sakura Mato, and is by far the most confusing of the 3 routes. This is why I recommend having watched at least one of the other 2, so that way you have a general idea of how the Grail Wars work. I don't really know how to describe it without spoiling too much, but I'd say this is probably my least favorite of the 3, and the one where Shiro is the most annoying, which might be saying a little bit. If you like Sakura, or just are interested in more Fate content, you can watch it, but honestly, I wouldn't judge you for skipping on this one. There are so many other things going on other than just the Grail War, it can be hard to keep track of. At this point, if you're following along, I would consider you well versed in the core of the Fate universe. You got the functions of a Grail War down, and have been introduced to the core cast in a couple different incarnations. Now it's time to partially break that mold, which has been built over the last 3 shows, and watch Fate Apocrypha. I slaughtered that, didn't I? It's time to watch this one. pretty much Fate Apocalypse. If you're like myself and need help spelling it, just type Fate Apocalypse into Google and you should find the wiki for it. Although I watched it after getting through the core of Fate, the Stay Night routes, and Zero, you should be able to just pick it up cold or be sitting pretty good after just one show. At the start, there's a small bone to be thrown to those who have watched Fate Zero, but overall it explains everything and brings a new take to the storytelling patterns of the first couple. The show also happens in a parallel universe to Fate Stay Night, if you really want to get into the details, but that's a headache to sort out in my opinion, and will require another video. To give you the premise, another faction from the normal one has obtained the Grail, and to determine its owner, the Grail starts a Grail war with double the servants. That is, both the black and red factions get a set of servants and fight over the ownership of the Grail. Storytelling-wise, the story doesn't focus on that for very long. It moves on to a character-focused storyline. I would recommend this to anyone, no matter how far into the Fate universe they are. The next one I want to touch briefly on is Fate Grand Order First Order. This is a standalone, hour-long episode which covers the first singularity in the Fate Grand Order game. Having played the game, I watched the anime for maybe 15 minutes, left it overnight, and the next day, since I couldn't remember anything distinct, I just dropped it. I don't recommend watching it if you plan on or have played the Fate Grand Order mobile game. Otherwise, I would recommend watching before any of the other Fate Grand Order installments because it gives you a good amount of background knowledge on the way the Grand Order and the Chaldeus works. Now we're going to take a short break from Grand Order and talk about the Extra universe. The writer of the original Fate Stay Night and the writer of Fate Extra graphic novel wrote an original story called Fate Extra Last Encore. Many people said it was bad, and myself having to Google an ending explanation isn't a very good sign. The writer generally writes a lot longer-winded stuff compared to a short 13-episode anime. Fate Stay Night's around 40-50 hours, so writing an original anime storyline just isn't what he's used to. Either way, it was a little mind-bending and I enjoyed it, and wouldn't not recommend it. For a brief synopsis, from my understanding there's a moon holy grail that's been set up in a virtual world. Characters from Stay Night are put through a short school before having to fight to the death in order to enter into a tower of 7 floors. Once into the tower, they fight as masters to climb the tower and have the moon holy grail grant their wish. There are a lot of twists and it's kind of interesting, so again, I wouldn't not recommend it. It's kind of out of order from my list, but I'm going to cover the other shows in the Fate Grand Order universe and recommend on all of these you've either played through or watched at least the first singularity, as it gives you a good idea what's going on and everything else can be pieced together or it is explained. Fate Grand Order, the Absolute Demon Battlefront Babylonia, is a new Fate show in 2019 and 2020. I would definitely recommend checking it out. I've only watched a couple of episodes, but things are getting interesting, and I expect it to continue this way. In the Fate Grand Order game, at least when I last played, there were 7 singularities, and this anime focuses on the 7th one. There is an episode 0, which I recommend everyone checking out, which talks about Dr. Romani and MASH. With just a few more series to go, this is where my knowledge becomes secondhand. Let's start with Carnival Phantasm. To quote the wiki, it says, it places characters of the Fate and Tsukihime series into various comedic situations. For this, I kind of recommend watching Fate Stay Night and Unlimited Blade Works, judging on the fact that this aired about the same time, and from the skits I've seen, it shows characters and personalities from both of those series. It's a complete comedy, and from what I've seen so far, it's pretty decent. I'm probably going to watch it after I'm caught up with Babylonia. Fate Kaleid Linear Prisma has a couple different seasons and iterations pop up, so it appears on the list a number of times. Reading through the comments on the page, viewers recommend watching the core of Fate before watching this series. That is to say, Fate Stay Night, Unlimited Blade Works, Heaven's Feel, and Fate Zero. It takes place in the alternate world where Kiritsugu and Irisfeel help end the Holy Grail War ritual before it could start, sealing Illya's memories away and allowing her to grow up as a normal girl. It turns out it's not targeted at a younger audience. It's targeted at lolicons. I don't know, maybe if enough people try to pressure me into watching it, I will, but for now that's all I can really give you. The movie Oath Snow has kind of a similar backstory. It's pretty much exactly the same, and it's a little bit more grizzled and a little bit more targeted towards the same audience that the mainstream Fate universe is for. And I would definitely recommend checking that one out. I plan to. Fate Prototype is an alternate Fate Stay Night universe. From what I've read on the wiki, it's a lot like the rough draft version of Fate Stay Night. It's a 12-minute special release with Carnival Phantasm, and there aren't any plans to make it a full story. I guess it exists, but unless what you read on the wiki intrigues you, I probably wouldn't recommend it. Watching this in the same way, I don't recommend watching Sword Art Online for Aincrad. I think you'll end up being disappointed to a lack of content on the subject. Even though it isn't an anime, I will mention it has a prequel story, Fate Prototype Fragments, Sky of Silver, which has a light novel and has been adapted into a drama CD. I don't know what drama CDs are, but I guess if you're interested, you can check it out. Lord Melloi II Case Files is a sideshow that doesn't have a Grail War. I don't know much about it, but plan to watch it in the future, and as such, I'm going to read to you the plot directly from the Fate Wiki. 10 years after the Fourth Holy Grail War, Waver Velvet, now Lord Melloi II, and in charge of the Department of Modern Magecraft, solves problems and investigates mysteries in the thaumaturgy world on the behalf of mages with the help of his apprentice Gray, all the while navigating the cutthroat politics of the Clock Tower. It sounds interesting, and I'll likely watch it in the future. Fate Grand Order Moonlight-Lostroom is the last show I'm going to talk about today, and I'm just going to read it from the wiki again. I plan to watch this in the near future. It centers on a lost room, where you can find what was lost or those who lost. This room lies forgotten in a corner of the Chaldea. It serves as a transition between parts 1.5 and 2 of the game's story. Sorry it took me so long to make this video. It has a lot of research and editing. If there's enough of a demand for it, I can look into making something like this for the manga, light novels, and the visual novels. I hope everyone enjoys the Fate universe as much as I do and has an awesome day. Thank you for watching.